Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Jeremy Smith here on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council, who represent about 400,000 unionized workers, construction workers in California. The very workers who will benefit from this fee and the compliance monitoring unit being robust and effective. I'd like to acknowledge the previous speaker's comments regarding the whole point of this discussion, which is to ensure that workers get the pay they deserve and that labor laws to protect those workers are followed. It also means a lot to contractors, the good contractors, who have to play against the underground economy, against the bad contractors out there. So I appreciate those comments from the contracting community. They joined with us to create this unit a few years back. But it's clear that when you talk about oversight and the fee and regulations, that DIR is probably one of the best regulatory bodies I know about. They oversee Cal OSHA, for example. I attend dozens per year advisory committees where stakeholders come together, talk about regulations, dealing with Cal OSHA, dealing with regulations that keep workers safe. They know how to do at DIR stakeholder regulatory processes. Regarding the fee and the statutory cap on the fee, we would oppose that. DIR has to come before this committee every year to defend their budget. And they will, all of you will retain your oversight through this subcommittee on that fee, whether it's working, whether it's too low, whether it's too high. If it's been raised, Ms. Baker and her predecessors will have to be here to defend raising those fees or lowering them. So any kind of statutory cap on that fee, I believe, will have plenty of oversight before this subcommittee and in the Senate budget subcommittee. And finally, I just want to reiterate again that we are here today to ensure that workers get paid and get the benefits they deserve. And I appreciate the back and forth about the fee and whether there should be regulations and whether we should do it in statute. I believe the regulatory process allows for the quickest turnaround when it comes to problems with this or any other regulation or law that's been passed by this body. If contractors have a problem with something, they can approach Ms. Baker and say, we have a problem, here's how it's not working. She can immediately turn around and convene regulatory meetings to react. You know, if that happens to come in October when you all are gone and adjourned, that's a good thing because you're not here. So the regulatory process allows for the quickest turnaround to address concerns both from our part and from the contracting community part about this fee or anything else dealing with laws or regulations that affect this industry. So we would appreciate moving forward with this today, closing this out, not leaving it open. We are opposed to the statutory cap. We believe the oversight remains because they have to come to defend the budget every year. And we believe the regulatory process is a very good place to do the rules around this idea because it allows for the stakeholders to have immediate redress of their concerns as opposed to waiting for the legislature to come back every year to pass a law. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Welcome.
Mr. Chairman and members, Tom Duffy for the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. You've heard from contractors and you've heard from labor. I represent the school districts that build schools and utilize both. We are in support of the concept of this budget proposal. We think that it resolves an issue that has developed in California since 2003 when labor compliance, and that was the term, began to be a function at the school district level. We believe it worked well. It was a difficult thing to initiate, but it was, we thought, working, but it was determined to change the function and to the system we have today. And I won't go into that, but it has created issues at the local level that I think this proposal will eliminate. Those issues really have to do with school district responsibility for notice as well as a contractor's responsibility for notice. And it has created some issues for districts that involve penalties to districts not being able to be funded adequately through the state allocation board. There's an item on appeal before the allocation board next week on this very issue, where one school district is supposedly to be penalized because it failed to report in an adequate time. So this would resolve those kinds of issues. We are in support of the labor laws in California and in labor compliance. We believe that this will resolve existing issues, and the school districts, as the owners and the builders, will end up supporting that fee being paid to the contractors, because contractors, I'm sure, will pass that along. So it's not an issue of cost. It's really, I think, an issue of this is a better way to govern and enforce labor compliance.
Thank you,
very
sir.
much.
Thank you. Committee members, are there any other public comments? If not, committee members, do you have any questions or observations? One question I have is the total number of contractors. The point was raised that maybe the contractor's licensing board should collect the fee rather than DIR, and there was a mention of 290,000 contractors in California. It looks like the total fee revenue is based on collecting a fee from about 40,000 contractors. Is that, and I'm assuming that's how many contractors you expect will be wanting to do public works projects. All the remaining have no interest in doing that, so therein lies the gap. Nevertheless, 40,000 contractors, that's a lot of billing and so forth for you all to handle.
We have a sterling team of
Okay.
IT that can build this on an online basis. We have lots of online payment systems, from FLCs to electrical to certification. We're good at this. So we do know that we can get this up and running and make it easily accessible for the contractors.
The AGC sent a letter to you in February, about 3 weeks ago. Do you intend to respond to that, or is it your intent to wait? You mentioned you've had discussions.
Right.
But they laid out quite a few the issues. The one that really hits home, I think, for our economy is what happens to a contractor whose sub is found not to have paid the fee in a timely way. I mean, how are you going to? Is it going to be
a gotcha game? It is
Right.
really to correct. So really, it's through this regulatory process, because it is complex. All the issues, and when we do it,
I
we
think it
want
would be-
to work with the parties to
It would be helpful
address
to see those commitments in writing. Since the AGC went in writing with their concerns, there's no specific date for the hearing to review, for your hearing to review the proposed regulations. There's no specific date yet. Meanwhile, there's a letter on record by the AGC with their questions. I'd like to see a written response to the points they've made, and you may not have an answer on every point, but at least to address, to the extent you accept their points, and you can consider those a non-issue, or we can consider those a non-issue, that would be helpful.
We would be happy to. We're working with them to clarify. Some of it was misunderstanding. I think we can move through those points. And
Well, it's a new fee program. It's a new fee program, and it will affect at least 40,000 businesses in our state. And so the points are important, and your responses are important, regardless of when the required hearings on the proposed regulations down the road will take place. But I think before we put this into the budget, it would be good to have the department on record in response. So I'm going to recommend we hold this over. Hopefully we can deal with this very soon after you've responded to the points that have been raised.
Thank you.
And I believe you will respond. I mean, I'm not doubting that. It would be helpful
Have those
to
points.
the extent there are outstanding questions and issues, to resolve as many of them as possible
Sure.
before you get into your
Regulatory.
regulatory process.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you. Issue 4 are the remaining DIR budget proposals. I think we don't need a presentation on this. Mr. Griffith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Christian Griffith with the Assembly Budget Committee. It's my understanding, Mr. Chair, that there's a desire to split the motion on this particular item.
Yes. Yes.
And
Make a motion. Yeah, I make a motion to approve only the $130,000 for the implementation of SB 390.
is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and second. We'll do a roll call and vote.
Mr. Daly?
Aye.
Mr. Morrell?
Aye.
Mr. Mullen?
Aye.
Mr. Nazarian?
Aye.
Mr. Wagner?
Aye.
And then a motion's in order for the remainder of that item.
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion and second to approve the remainder of that budget proposal. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Daly?
Aye.
Morrell?
No.
Mullen? Nazarian?
Yes.
Wagner?
No.
All right, that completes the Department of Industrial Relations items for today. Thank you very much. Appreciate all your all the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
The last item today will be the California Department of Veterans Affairs. And again, committee members, I'll ask Mr. Griffith to clarify what the Republican intent is, but I think on issue 7 they're suggesting a split vote again. Okay, gotcha. We're on the issue 5 and actually issue 5. This is an update on the veterans funding initiatives from last year. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Michael Wells, the Undersecretary for Operations, and I have with me Deputy Secretary Keith Boylan. He's the architect of the initiative process. We just wanted to say first that we appreciate the legislature's efforts last year to support this particular initiative. It's produced extraordinarily great results, and I think you'll be very pleased with everything that Mr. Boylan has to say.
Great, thank you for the opportunity. As we put the teams together last year after the budget passed, we moved pretty swiftly in developing an MOU with the USDVA and started to implement the program. As of March 13th, 2014, we've hired 24 of the 36 staffers and have processed 9,667 claims. That work has resulted in over $3 million in lump sum payments to the veterans. Lump sum payment is defined as one which is relative to their rating and as it relates to the amount of time that their claim's been in the backlog. Obviously, some of those lump sum payments are pretty significant considering how long many of these veterans have been waiting for their funds through this backlog process. In addition, $2.5 million has been received in ongoing annualized veteran benefits payments. So those are benefits that those veterans will receive for the rest of their lives. So we're very excited about those initial results. These numbers are, I feel, staggering considering the few months that we've been at this. Initially, got the MOU signed in September, the HR process, getting the certifications and clearances through the USDVA was quite time-consuming. We streamlined much of this process in in October. The furlough happened, so that shut down all the VA facilities, so that pushed us back a little further. So we really didn't hit the ground running until later on in October. So in that short period of time, we've had some significant results, so we're very pleased with that.
Any comment by Finance Department or LAO? Finance first. LAO, any comments?
Sean Martin with the Legislative Analyst's Office. We've reviewed the interim report on this initiative, and we look forward to receiving the final report on April 1st. If we have any issues, we'll bring them to your attention at the time of the May revision.
Committee members, the results are pretty dramatic, and we have another round of information coming to us by April 1st, I'm going to recommend we hold this item open. The question before us down the road a bit will be whether to augment this funding because it's been so productive, or possibly to even make it permanent in the budget. Mr. Mullen, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question regarding these county veteran service offices. The committee report references $47 million in benefits, sort of a calculation that's being done. Is that predicted to be an annual recurring?
It is. What we did is we took the September to February of 2012 to 13 up against 2013 to 2014. So just a point of clarity, in terms of the report that's due on April 1st, that is for the $3 million that was given in support of the county subvention process. The strike team money has been approved for 2 years. So that report will be forthcoming. But yes, that $47 million is based on the 6-month period of the previous year in comparison to September to February of 2013 to 14.
But that is, you are asserting that that will be an ongoing, annualized kind of benefit that will be realized.
Yes, that, and I think it's a safe bet that in addition to that, it will grow. I mean, with the County Veteran Service increase in subvention, we came across the same type of hurdles in terms of implementing this. It took some time. AB 101 didn't pass till some time later. By the time it got signed and we implemented that process, the counties then still had to go to their Board of Supervisors, which we required them to have a certificate of compliance, which stated, based on the best practice manual we had developed in partnership with them previously that year, we assigned the metrics that would be associated with whatever their efforts would be. That needed to go through their County Board of Supervisors process. For various counties, it depended what kind of access they have to that process and when they were able to get it on their Board of Supervisor agenda. So that pushed, depending on how that county worked that out, that they're actually getting the additional allotment. Some got it as recently as December. So considering that once again, that short amount of time frame, that's what we've seen in this first 6 months. And I would assume, considering that they didn't have the money that entire 6 months, that the next year would be higher.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Nazarian.
This might be a little premature, but can you project how much of an augmentation you'd need when you come back? For the
subvention program, or are you referring for...
In place of the one-time funding that was received?
Yeah, there's two pieces. There's the help with the federal process, with the federal offices, and then there's the money that flows to the counties. You're asking for clarification on that.
It's one point in past years, $11 million was actually the amount that was allocated, approved for County Veteran Service offices. The highest amount we've been to is $2.6 million. The additional $3 million. And continuing at that level would certainly help the County Veteran Service offices serve veterans throughout the state. But in terms of a ceiling, if you're asking, I think the more the County Veteran Service offices had, the more they'd be able to help the veterans throughout the state.
And I would suggest also that if you look at the impacts of other states of comparable size to California, they have substantially larger sized County Veteran Service Office programs than what we do. So they are seeing, I think, a higher level of return. But again, you know, I don't think that was the question that's there either.
Just to clarify, no, it was with the $3 million augmentation from the federal funds. On an ongoing basis, what would your conservative estimate be that you'd be coming and potentially asking?
Excuse me, John Fitzpatrick, Department of Finance. At this time, we haven't prepared an estimate of what level of funding would be sufficient to continue activities at a particular level. And it was, as I understand, general fund, one-time $3 million general fund provision last year for CVSO efforts. There's also a 2-year in total $6 million general fund provision for efforts related to reducing the federal backlog. Not sure if I misunderstood reference to federal funding.
All right. We have at least one public comment. This will be an opportunity for public comments. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete Conity, representing the California Association of County Veteran Service Officers, and I want to thank you for the money we got last year, and we've used it wisely, and as we're working closely with CDVA, but given the rules of the road they operate under, they sometimes can't answer your questions. We need at least $3 million. We need permanent funding at the $5.6 million level in order just to stay even. If we got to the level of benefits that Texas has, we would have $720 million in additional benefits annually in the state of California. So you're authorized to go to $11 million. Right now we're going back to $2.6 million under the current budget, and that means that all the 18 full-time new Veterans Service representatives and the 22 part-time Veterans Service representatives in the county offices will probably have to be let go if this funding isn't raised up to $5.6 million and made permanent. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And we will provide this information to the committee.
Thank you. Very helpful. Thank you very much. Are there other public comments on any of these Department of Veteran Affairs items? If not, thank you very much. Again, we'll have some decisions to make in the near future about extending the funding, increasing it, or other options. So we'll hold this item open. And thank you very much to the Veterans staff. Brings us to an update on Veterans Homes. This is issue number 6. Please tell us the latest regarding the Veterans Homes. Go ahead, please.
Certainly. Good afternoon. My name is Diane Vanderpot. I'm the Undersecretary for the Veterans Homes. Beside me is Pune Simpson. She is the Chief Financial Officer for the Veterans Homes. I want to thank you today for the opportunity to come before you and talk a little bit about the homes. In October of 2013, we were able to finally open the Reading and Fresno homes. It was a very proud moment for most of those two communities. We had an incredible turnout of the community. It was very welcoming. Since then, we have admitted 46 residents into the home, 23 in each of the homes. Last month, we received our certification from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs for our RCFE, the Residential Community Facility for Elderly. So that allows us to start receiving per diem for that level of care. We also are coming up with our SNF openings. We plan on opening up our SNFs with the activation in Reading on the 23rd of June and Fresno on the 28th of April. So our ramp up in those two homes continues about on progress. We, overall in the homes, we are at 90% capacity. That means we are serving 1,700 veterans within our homes. We continue to do well on our surveys and our certifications. In the West LA home, we passed our RCFE and DOM, which is domiciliary independent care, last month, which means, again, we'll start receiving the per diem in that home. Tomorrow starts our certification for the skilled nursing facilities from the USDVA. Once we receive that, then again, we'll start, we'll be able to admit more residents into the skilled nursing, and we will also start receiving per diem for the residents there. I think you probably know that in late September, we started the Transitional Housing Program, which is a collaborative with the USDVA West LA campus, helping them find beds for the homeless. It's a huge transition program that is out of the USDVA. They provide the education, the counseling, the employment training, and any kind of psychiatric care that these residents need, once they are able to stand on their feet but not quite ready to enter to live independently, we offer them a lodging facility within our home. It's a, as I mentioned, it's just started in September. It's a very new program. Since then, we've had 35 residents come through. Right now, we have 29 residents currently living in the home, with 2 more admissions this week. And we've actually had 7 successfully leave the program, find jobs, find places to live, and basically start a new life. We have 2 budget proposals for the continued ramp-up of the Reading and Fresno homes. We expect the Reading home to have its final ramp-up and be up to 150 by next year, and then the Fresno home, it's 300 residents, and so it'll take 2 years for that ramp-up. And we ask that you would approve those 2 VCPs for the ramp-ups. Thank you.
Thank you. The West Los Angeles site appears to be limited because of the food service aspects, not because of the available number of beds. There are empty beds at that site. The food service improvements are scheduled to be completed in the spring of 2016. Is that on schedule?
Yes.
All right. Are there any other questions, committee members? Mr. Mullen, then Mr. Nazarian.
Just on the food service, it seems like a fairly long timeline. Obviously, I haven't been through that facility. Is that like a kitchen improvement project, or is that a more extensive kind of a thing that would take a considerable amount of time? I was just curious about the timeline on that.
Right. There was never a kitchen made to feed 396 residents there. Therefore, there's space in the basement. There was, I guess, a cutout for it, but we've never put it in there. So it's actually a build-out of a complete kitchen. So that's what it is. Preliminary planning is through June of this year, with the working drawing phase through May of 2015, and the final completion of construction by...
So you're like starting from scratch. It's not as though you're renovating an existing food area.
It's technically a capital outlay project. So we have to go to Public Works Board for both plans and drawings and so forth. It has the 3 phases and everything. We're starting from scratch. We're using the remaining authority from the Lease Revenue Bond Authority for funding. And, yeah, spring of 2016, but we are on track.
Mr. Nazarian, questions?
Thank you. Just wanted to piggyback on the question being asked by Mr. Mullen. What's the possibility of maybe shortening that timeline, or double shifts, or overtime, in order to get the construction underway quicker and be able to utilize, I think it's about 284 or something, number of beds that are underutilized at this point, right?
So since he so stealthily came to the table, I just want to take a moment and introduce Dave Gerard, who is our capital assets person.
How do you do? To speak to your question, you know, the project itself has taken a while to determine the scope of work necessary, so we are starting from scratch. If we were to, there is some truth to perhaps adding additional funding to it, but to do that, we would also be paying a lot of money for soft costs, administrative fees and so forth. So you'd get the complement of potential construction urgency, but you'd also be adding to some of the administrative costs and so forth. So that needs to be recognized. The other thing is that we would have to go back and get additional authority for the amount of money, for the additional money. We'd also have to determine where that came from. Would it come from the Lease Revenue Bond Authority that's available that we have approval for, or perhaps would that have to be a general fund augmentation? You know, the fact that we need a kitchen there, it would be my recommendation, since we are on track, we're getting the design to accommodate all 396 residents, that we let that materialize. If we throw extra money in it, in my experience, what we end up doing is spending a lot of money, and we consolidate it by a couple of months, perhaps nothing more. We still have the Public Works Board process. We still have, a variety of things that we have to get past, regardless of how much money that we allocate towards a project. And quite honestly, I don't have an analysis of what that would take to shorten the process up.
Would you be able to provide one?
It would cost money to do that as well. I mean,
so then, going a little back, I love my staff notes. It says, home was inexplicably built without a full-service kitchen. Could you shed some light on that?
The kitchen was not included in the design of the building because when we accepted the property, we also accepted conditions, and those conditions were sharing agreements for, I think, 5 different provisions: pharmacy, food service, medical services, laundry, a variety of things that the feds were going to provide. And so once we were done with construction, completely done, we were already in activation phase, we found that there were problems with the budget cycles of both the state and the federal process. And the feds determined that they would not be able to provide those services that were originally agreed to once we had activated. And so it's not so simple to just say, okay, now let's just build a kitchen. We had to get commitments from Department of Social Services. We had to get commitments from the Department of Public Health. Those are the 2 licensing entities, to figure out exactly what was required in this very complex building. And therefore, once we got that squared away, we then started working towards a conceptual idea, a scope, funding, requisite funding. Remember, the contract had actually closed. And so to open that back up, to get public approval, to get funding from the Department of Finance that they're comfortable with, it took a bit of time. So that's sort of where we are. And that's basically the history of why the building was constructed without a kitchen.
The federal Department of Veterans Affairs made a decision midstream to withhold money?
It wasn't to withhold money. It was the offset of the different funding cycles made it incompatible for them to provide the services that they had originally agreed to.
Did anyone try to convince them otherwise? There was no way for the federal administrators to resolve that problem?
At the time...
is there a paper trail on that?
That I'm not certain of. That was...
What year was that decision made?
I'd say 2009? Yeah, 2009, 2010. Mm-hmm.
Was it made clear to the federal administrators of the VA that they would result in that disservice to the veterans community?
I would suggest that we probably did everything in our power to try to convince, persuade, influence as to what the impact was.
Was it kicked upstairs at all?
Oh, certainly.
All right.
But you have
That's why the paper trail would be interesting, because we heard some of this from the Secretary of State's office a couple of years ago. When people do this, and I'm always curious because I've dealt with bureaucracies for 25 years, and normally when someone makes a decision, there's someone above that person who can override it.
Sure.
And to just say the VA, the federal VA, made a decision like that is pretty stunning. Was anyone given a chance to override it and really consider what the outcome was going to be, building a home for veterans without a kitchen? I mean, I'd like to see the paper trail from those years. It wasn't that long ago. And now there's a 2-year process to go back and retrofit a kitchen. It just seems it's embarrassing.
I don't
That the biggest state in the union couldn't coordinate with the federal government on this project, right? Couldn't do it. So, other questions or comments? All right.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other points that you want to make regarding the veterans' homes? Go ahead.
One more question. When you're making the hirings for these facilities, especially the 2 facilities in Northern California that we opened, what are we doing to hire members from the veteran community?
Pune Simpson again, Chief Financial Officer. We have multiple efforts of hiring veterans. First of all, the state civil service process gives veterans an advantage in the hiring process through the exams that they can get additional points. We have marketed our vacancies both publicly through radio and TV and through veterans organizations, not only in the communities where our new homes are, but throughout the state. We're also reaching specialty skilled organizations, so healthcare organizations that have publications or memberships, and advertising our vacancies through those venues that may reach veterans. Overall, we did a survey in 2010, so prior to the last 2 homes, and we had an average of 20% veterans that we have hired. In the last 2 homes that we've opened, we have hired about 10% veterans so far. But we're still in the ramp-up process, so the hiring is not complete.
And raw number-wise, what would that be? What would the 10%, what are the raw numbers?
The 2 new homes roughly have about 100 veterans.
Okay.
In Fresno, I know they've hired 100 employees. In Fresno, they've hired 16 veterans so far, and in Reading, it's a little bit less than that. I believe it's 8. I can verify that real quick.
We've also partnered with the military department on their Work for Warriors program, and we advertise all of our vacancies on their program.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? This item will be held over pending the May revision. And it brings us, thank you very much, brings us to the last item, the remainder of the various veterans budget proposals. Are there any staff comments on those? Christian, do you have any?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Christian Griffith with the Assembly Budget Committee. These proposals are proposals that do not appear controversial. However, there's a request for split motion for this issue.
Right. Are there any Finance Department comments on the remainder of the budget? Anything from LAO? All right. We'll entertain a motion from the Republicans.
I'll motion to approve as budgeted the CVSO and the cemetery issues, please.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and second to that effect. Roll call vote, please.
Daly?
Aye.
Morrell?
Yes, excuse me.
Mullen? Aye. Nazarian? Aye. Wagner? Aye.
All right. And then a motion for the remainder of this proposal, of this budget proposal, is in order. Motion and second. Thank you. Roll call vote.
Daly?
Aye.
Morrell?
No.
Mullen? Aye. Nazarian? Yes. Wagner?
No.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to ask my staff to work with the budget staff to follow up on the what was mentioned earlier with the food service at the West LA facility and how the decision was made, and because I think that'll be instructive for us going forward to avoid something like that happening again. All right, we'll be back this coming Thursday upon adjournment of the session in a joint hearing with the Select Committee on Government Efficiency, Technology, and Innovation. And then next Tuesday, this subcommittee, Budget Subcommittee number 4, will be meeting to discuss the rev and tax issues, employee compensation issues, and local government issues. That concludes our hearing. Thank you very much.